fact, it would not have been possible to achieve what they wanted without the basis that had been laid. And this led to some attacks in the late 1970s, sometimes deteriorating into abuse when the leadership got arrested. They are not rigged in favour of the ANC as such, but sections of the ANC benefit.
On his release from prison in 1983, Raymond Suttner became involved in the United Democratic Front while simultaneously maintaining illegal contact with the ANC and SACP. Suttner was arrested again in 1986 under the state of emergency and held for 27 months, 18 months of which was in solitary confinement. During the last period of his detention, Suttner was allowed a pet lovebird, which he trained and kept inside his shirt. The bird emerged with him from detention. While there have been many outstanding individual leaders in the ANC, one of the hallmarks of the party seems to have been reference to a collective. How do you interpret this?
It wasn't always the case. The notion of collective leadership only started in the 1950s with Sisulu as Secretary General of the ANC. Before that, it was individual, charismatic or not charismatic leaders. And the importance of collective then was that an individual did not decide, but that it was more democratic. See, collective has, as we referred to, it has a number of different potentialities. On the one hand, in war situations, it restricts what you can do. But in the context of the ANC of that time, when it started, to have collective leadership made it much more democratic than to have individual leadership. But it also meant that having discussed it fully, the collective would abide by that decision until individuals had persuaded others to depart from it. So this was a democratization of the ANC.
Given the challenges of modern government, is this notion of a collective leadership still appropriate?
It is a tried and tested method, but the question is the relationship between collectivism and centralization. Now, people have written that after liberation struggles, the populist struggle collapses into centralization. The organization or party collapses into the cabinet, who centralize in a alleged collective leadership. And in fact, the centralization tends to go to the president. Now, that would have variations in South Africa, with Mandela being quite old when he became president, but he did centralize some decisions. And he sometimes also, as ANC leader, took decisions outside of the collective, like starting negotiations. He knew very well, he says so, that this was without organizational approval. Now, some people would say, well, what does that say for collective leadership? Others would say, well, he was far-sighted and in retrospect he's vindicated. But when Mbeki did that, he couldn't carry it off. He didn't have the prestige of Mandela.
How does ANC leadership in the Zuma era compare with leadership under the likes of Mbeki, Mandela, Sisulu, Luthuli?
First of all, you must note the names you've mentioned are all men. And it's noteworthy that the leadership of the ANC has, the models of leadership in the ANC have tended to be male models. The significance of post-1990 leadership is that it's not a complete break with ANC history, in that the ANC created possibilities for centralization, for militarism, for a number of other things, because we never fully came to terms with the past. And what we see in the Zuma era is a leadership with a fairly high representation of people who are convicted of criminality, people who are definitely involved in irregularity, people who have never faced charges against them like the president himself. And it is a leadership which is at war with itself, not over ideas, but over positions and over loot. And the paralysis of Zuma relates to incapacity to resolve this. Now, when Zuma goes, because I believe that he will not necessarily serve out his full term, when Zuma goes, no one is able to hold these people together because they are not fighting, they're not resoluble. There's a finite amount of wealth that can be dispensed through the ANC and through state bodies, and there's a finite number of positions. The Zuma era, for me, carries continuities with the past in that there is a heroic element that he fed into, the militarization, which ANC never came to terms with properly for the modern period. There was a legacy of heroism, integrity, and those things, but there was also a legacy of dishonesty and violence. Now, the Zuma era sees a preference being given to looting, tolerance of irregularities, illegalities, and violence, and also in the president's sexual escapades. And generally, you can see that the ANC never entrenched gender equality properly or freedom of sexual orientation. Under the Zuma era, these are under threat, despite becoming fully recognized rights under the Bill of Rights.
Next time we will discuss the glorification of violence on Reflections with Raymond Suttner.
Ever since Zuma's rape trial, you have had a glorification of the gun. This is referred to as liberation heritage, is problematic. Explain to young boys that there are alternative models of manhood.